Welcome everybody. Merry Samhain. Welcome to our Halloween edition of Two Girls, One Rant. Destiny is out today, but know that this is her favorite holiday. I am super excited, guys. I love Halloween. It's not my favorite holiday of the year. It's up there. It's on the top tier, man. But thank you everybody for coming in today. Looking forward to getting going today. We have the history of Halloween. I mean, some holidays are easy to figure out, like where they came from. Kind of. I mean, we do have, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Valentine's Day, Easter. For the most part, we know why we have those Halloweens. I've got Halloween on the brain, guys. We know why we have those holidays. But Halloween is one of those that we kind of take for granted in America and probably Canada too. So how did Halloween come about? Well, it's actually very, very interesting. And I'm excited to share all that with you guys. So let's get right into it. For most Americans, Halloween is about dressing up in all sorts of costumes, from monsters to superheroes. I mean, you got your slutty nurses, which I agree with that meme that's going around right now. If you dress up as a slutty nurse, be prepared to punch in at a shift at your local hospital. Other parts of Halloween that we are used to is going trick-or-treating as a kid, or as adults going to Halloween parties, carving pumpkins, decorating in the fall fashion. What people really don't know is how we ended up here and how other countries might celebrate the holiday as well. So let's dive in by taking a trip back in time, about 2,000 years, to the time of the Celts. Now, the Celts spanned most of Europe as well as the British Isles. Now, and the term Celt is a collective one. The Celts had different tribes and territories in which they held their own belief system. In general, Celtic beliefs had as many similarities between tribes as it did differences. They might call a god or goddess one thing, and in a different tribe or territory, they might call it something else. But the underlying beliefs and ways that they lived were generally similar. So, with that being said, let's go back over to Ireland when they were the Celtic Irish. Now, the Irish celebrated this holiday known as Samhain. Now, it is spelled Samhain, but it's not Samhain. It's pronounced Samhain due to the way that the M and the H go together in their language. Now, this also translates to summer's end, and as well in the Irish language, that means November. Now, the British Celts, just across the little water there, Collingafe is what it was called, but it was the same celebration held on the same day. Both were October 31st. Surprise, surprise, our Halloween. Their festivities went from sundown to sunrise. Now, this date is pretty significant as it marked the beginning of winter. And though it's still debated, November 1st was believed to mark the new year in the Celtic calendar. It was a time to honor the dead, as well as some other things. Being that this marked a significant portion of their calendar, this was also a time that they drove cattle from where they were grazing out and about back towards the villages for storage for winter. Some of them would be slaughtered for meat during the winter, as the colder temperatures would mean better food storage, as well as a chance to take inventory, see if they lost anything, had their herd multiplied at all. It was also an opportunity to hold councils, place laws, hand out punishments, and officially end the season of war, because during that time, you didn't fight war in winter. And that stayed true all the way through till the Tudor period, even. Now, the Celts, in their beliefs, were very in tune with nature. They had a heavy reliance on it. So just as Beltane was a spring festival celebrating warmth and light, and its celebrations kind of represented that, you can imagine that Samhain, being the opposite, held a lot darker things. So they believed that the veil that separated the world of the living and the dead during this time of year was at its thinnest. A person was believed to be able to cross into the other world just as beings in that other world could cross into ours. So, for that reason, people would stay near the village because, in addition to the spirits of their ancestors being able to come visit, foul spirits and fairies, which today we think of fairies and sprites as these fun loving, cute little creatures, but to the ancient Celts, they were not. The Shadhi, which I'm pronouncing that wrong, which was a classification of fairy, were actually very mean, evil, manipulative, and downright dangerous. If anybody has read Dresden, you'll know that they stayed true in the book series to what the ancient Celts believed fairies were. You did not want to cross one or come into contact in one. So, their celebration for Samhain. It was meant to honor the dead and the ancestors, of course. Because the veil was believed to be the thinnest at this point, they would have food set out and drink set out for their ancestors to come and consume on their one night of being able to come and be with them. Exactly, Mama. The Dresden Files, good set of books. It mishes and matches together all sorts of different beliefs and creatures, and it's just wonderful. I love it. During their celebrations, there would of course be a lot of feasting, horse races, other contests, and plenty of alcohol. Bonfires were lit and actually had a couple of different purposes. This is where they could make some animal sacrifices to ward off evil spirits, as well as divination rituals, and some believed as well that the bonfires would imitate the warmth that the sun would bring as a way to ward off evil spirits. Now, some people would also dress in costumes, mainly made of hides and bones from animals that they had killed for food. But they would look scary and intimidating to help ward off the evil spirits that might have come back to harm or curse them. Now, in addition to the food and drink that we mentioned that they might leave out to welcome ancestors back to their home, they would also sometimes light a candle in their home in a window or just right outside the front door as a way to help guide that spirit back to their home. If they did this, they believed that they might receive a blessing for being accommodating to their ancestor and remembering them and honoring them. Not really much else is known about how the Celts celebrated. There's different theories, different ideas, but mainly for the Irish, this is what we know about how they celebrated Samhain. But of course, they're not the only people that ever celebrated a Halloween type holiday or honored their dead. Let's look at the Romans. The Romans had their own festival of fruitfulness and abundance for the goddess of Pomona. And actually, in this festival, that's where they thought that the tradition of apple bobbing may have come from or made its first appearance. Now, it's not the sole reason why we have apple bobbing today at parties. That was popularized mainly in the Victorian era. The Romans also had another one, Dies Peritinales, which was a 9-day celebration in February honoring the ancestral dead. Offering of food and drink were left next to tombs of the dead. Kind of sounds similar to the Celts, maybe some other people as well. And then they had the celebration of Lemuria or Lemuralia. It's been listed as both, so I'm not sure which is the correct one. But this one was held in May, in which they would drive evil spirits out of their homes. Now, after the conversion of Rome to Christianity, it was rebranded to All Saints' Day. Now, I actually didn't hear about All Saints' Day until I was in college, I think it was. And this one is mainly for the Roman Catholics that are out there. I think some others celebrate it too, but I believe the Roman Catholics are the ones who did start this. So instead of driving all the evil spirits out, they changed it as a day to venerate the saints rather than other pagan gods during this time. And then if we go a couple centuries on down the line after that, it was actually moved from May to November 1st. Although the exact reasons of this move are highly debated, and there's no records indicating the exact truth of why. So we know that the Celts and the Romans existed in the same time period because, well, Rome kind of conquered the majority of the Celtic tribes. So, before their lands were conquered by the Roman Empire, the Celtic tribes were often in contact with one another. So, we can believe that they heavily influenced their kind of rituals, beliefs, and cultures. Now, the Romans didn't conquer all Celtic tribes, keep in mind. By this point, Celtic and Germanic cultures had kind of driven quite a bit apart. As the Romans started going through and conquering some of the ones that were closer to them, their beliefs and traditions slowly started incorporating in with the Roman ones, which was very common even before Rome tried to go into Celtic territories. They would adopt gods of other cultures and civilizations long before this. Now, the Romans never did conquer Ireland, although they knew of its existence. We know that they did conquer Britannia. They conquered where England is today. However, with Hadrian's Wall, they didn't get above that to Scotland, where the Picts were known to be. So they didn't quite get everybody, but they got a good of what was considered the Celtic lands. And so some of these traditions blended in with the Romans, because as they tried to Romanize everybody else, it was easy to keep some of those original things there while changing their lifestyle from whatever it may have been, if they were primarily living in really shoddy houses, or what they considered to be shoddy houses and not the Roman style houses. They were definitely taking that over, as well as the way that they dressed and behavior. So let's move a little further in time to the birth of Christianity in Rome with Emperor Constantine in the 4th century AD. So when he adopted Christianity and started spreading it throughout his empire, it wasn't always convert or die. Now, convert or die did happen. And when this happened, they usually destroyed anything related to pagan idols, traditions, and culture in those areas. But a lot of other times, it was easier to do some negotiating with the people that they're trying to convert. So let's say that they had a celebration or a festival that they had, and they would be like, oh, you know what would be really cool? Well, you can keep your festival, but have it dedicated to the Christian God instead. So anything that was related to that would usually be kept, but the dedication, quote unquote, would be to the one true God. But that is how some of those traditions were able to continue to exist even after the conversion of a particular area. Examples of this that we do know of are Christmas and Easter. Now, while it was highly believed that Jesus was born in the spring, the church moved the celebration of Jesus' birthday to December 25th to coincide with Saturnalia, which was a pagan Roman holiday, which was several days of feasting and drunkenness all day, every day. As well as Easter, which was Ostara, which was a spring equinox festival with a focus on fertility, growth of crops, and rebirth of the land. That later became Easter. But we're not going to go into the specific details on those. That's just a quick high-level explanation of how certain festivals from the pagans and Celts would be incorporated with the church. So this theme of mixing that we have going on here, the cultures would start blending, as we spoke about earlier. In many cases, both of these cultures had a form of that holiday. One would call it one thing, one would call it another. They might have celebrated it in a different way, but the foundation of what the festival was for remained the same. So over time, because things didn't travel that entry, and we're talking over centuries worth of time, these traditions started slowly blending and migrating in one direction or another. And of course, the Roman Empire being as big as it was, traditions would vary, as well as the fact that the Celtic pagan religion was not an organized religion. It wasn't one with doctrine and things to follow like Catholicism. And there are no records of exactly what tradition existed for which area. It's only after the conversion of some of these lands that some of the monks started documenting what these traditions and festivities were. So let's move forward in time just a little bit to the medieval period. And this is where the customs over the centuries started kind of blending in faster. Travel was getting just a little bit faster and everything else. Countries were starting to slowly form into what we know them as today, although the boundary lines were still not there, as anybody who studies history knows. All Saints' Day was starting to be known as All Hallows' Day. Vigils would be held on the night before, making that day known as All Hallows' Evening. So later on in Scotland, it would be shortened to be All Hallows Even, and then Halloween, with the apostrophe between the two E's. And that's eventually how our Halloween name got to what it is today, as you can see on my screen. And then November 2nd was eventually made into All Souls Day, to remember the Christian souls who have been lost, as well as the souls in purgatory. This 3-day period would eventually be known as All Hallowtide or Hallowmas. And during this time, it wasn't uncommon for priests to dress up as their favorite saint. Parties would be held where participants would dress from a variety of social backgrounds and do the Dance Macabre, or the Dance of Death. Now, this was meant to be a reminder that no one is spared the eternal dance of death, so that all, in the end, that matters is the service of God, and that eventually all earthly things must come to an end. Doesn't matter if you were a peasant or a king, you do not get out of that escape. But I mean, that's not all what Halloween is either, is it? So let's talk about souling. This began around the early 14th century. Children, mostly from poorer backgrounds, would go from door to door asking for soul cakes. These were usually made with spices, and they had a cross shape pressed into them. In return, the children would often make prayers for people in purgatory. Around this time, it was also believed the souls that were returning from purgatory and going to heaven would make a stop in the earthly plane to visit their family members on their journey through. So food and drink would be left out as an offering for these souls. For areas that did follow this belief, because it wasn't done everywhere, some children would dress as spirits to represent these souls as they're outgoing souling. And it was also believed that dressing as a spirit would give them protection from any evil spirits that might have been around during the night. While children were out souling, they also carried with them a lantern made from a hollowed out turnip. This tradition continued on early into the 1900s by both Protestants and Catholics. That turnip kind of sounds a bit familiar, doesn't it? So when they're going door to door like this, it kind of sounds like an early form of trick-or-treating, doesn't it? So instead of going up to the door and saying trick or treat, the children were more likely to say something along the lines of this: soul cake, pray you, good mistress, a soul cake. 1 for Peter, 2 for Paul, 3 for him who made us all. So as America became the melting pot of cultures, souling came over with it. As mentioned, they carved turnips as lanterns at the time, but by now, they weren't being used as lanterns to go door to door. Instead, they were left out in front of the house to ward off evil spirits, and as well as to represent the spirits that are in purgatory. So at that time, faces ended up being carved into them to represent those spirits, or Jack of the Lantern. Now, we'll tell the story of Jack of the Lantern in a minute. But when they did come to America and continued this tradition, they found something that was far easier to carve into. And I bet you all guess what that is. That's right, pumpkins. So that is how we got our tradition of carving pumpkins, actually. But there's also a reason why we call pumpkins a jack-o'-lantern. So this is the story of Jack of the Lantern. So Jack was called Drunk Jack, Stingy Jack, or Jack of the Lantern, depending on who is telling the story. And I guess you can kind of see where this might be going. But he was a character in pre-modern Irish folklore. He was a vile, lying, cheating, manipulative scoundrel who played tricks on people. He stole from them and otherwise was a burden to society. One night, Jack was drunk, wandering through the countryside, when he came upon a figure in the road. That figure turned out to be Satan himself. Satan had heard tales of Jack's depravity. and had to come see it for himself. He told Jack that he was there to take his soul and bring him to hell. Jack grew quite depressed and begged Satan to grant him one last request. He asked for one last drink before going to the eternal fires of hell. Satan agreed, and they went off to a nearby pub. After several drinks, he asked Satan to pay by turning himself into a silver coin. Satan replied, "A strange request, but fair enough. Not that I expected any more from you." So, Satan turned himself into a silver coin, but having done so, Jack stuck the coin into his pocket next to a crucifix, which prevented Satan from returning to his original form. Jack demanded that Satan allow him to live for another year, to which Satan agreed, and they parted ways. 1 year passes to the day, and Jack finds himself in the same circumstances, with Satan upon the road once more. Jack asks Satan for a final request, but a simpler one this time. Jack wanted an apple. That was it. A simple fruit before eternal damnation. Having not learned his lesson from the last encounter with Jack, Satan went to the nearest apple tree to retrieve one. As he did this, Jack placed crucifixes around the tree, essentially blocking Satan within the circle. Satan was furious and demanded to be set free, but was forced to listen to Jack's demands. Jack states that he will let Satan go so long as he never takes Jack to hell. Reluctantly, Satan agrees, and once more they parted ways. Jack's lifestyle took a toll on him, and one day he finally died. His soul prepared to enter heaven, but as he approached the gates, God turned him away. There was no way he could enter, having lived the sinful lifestyle that he had. He went towards the gates of hell and begged Satan to allow him to come in. Jack thought hell would be better than wandering the netherworld alone for eternity, but Satan reminded Jack that they had made a deal. He would not be allowed to come to hell. Instead, Satan gave Jack an ember to be placed into a turnip to be used for a lantern, for him to see as he wandered the earth for all eternity at night. So that is Jack of the Lantern. So oftentimes there would be, around the bogs and everything else, there would be some gas and everything that would light up at night, and many would say that that was Jack of the Lantern. And sometimes they would also be called will-o-wisps. And there's other versions of the story, and it varies because it is old folklore. But Jack of the Lantern ended up becoming the jack-o'-lantern, which was represented when carving faces into turnips and later on pumpkins. Actually, until I did some research on this, I never knew this either. But it makes perfect sense because there was a lot of Irish and Scottish that had immigrated to America. And of course, any culture that immigrated to America brought that culture with them. And other people who found interest in this part or that part of the culture would start incorporating it into their own personal traditions. Let's not get bogged down in the story. Oh, Sholin, you are full of it today. But yeah, I thought that was a pretty cool story. So let's look at the 1800s. Fall or harvest celebrations began picking up tradition from all the different cultures that were coming to America at the time. Now, not all of them would be considered Halloween-ish, but over time it started blending and becoming to what we think of today. Another tradition, the Scottish. Here you go, Dave. Dave will kill me if I got that one actually wrong. The Scottish brought one called guising, which is similar to what the Irish did of souling. Children would dress up as spirits and go from home to home, asking for money or food. Now, when they brought this tradition with them to the Americas, it was first recorded of being practiced in America, and actually Ontario, Canada, as early as 1910, and it quickly spread to the rest of the U.S. after this. By 1920, it had spread down to Chicago, Illinois. Yes, you will. I figured you would. Am I getting this correct, Dave? Guising was the Scottish tradition, and a little bit different from souling, but kind of similar too. So, the progression of Halloween as we know it today. In Ireland and Scotland, children were doing souling and guising. And the ones who were doing this might be asked to perform certain skills, like sing a song or something, perform something in order for the treats to be given. People who gave these treats would expect good fortune. However, if the household that did not, they would expect misfortune, while some children decided not to wait for divine intervention and took it upon themselves to cause such misfortune. They would use the night of October 30th, and in England, they would use the night of November 4th as a night for pranks and vandalism, giving it the nickname of Mischief Night. They would egg homes, smash light bulbs, disassemble wagons, and sometimes reassemble them on top of roofs and leave them. But as this mischief spun out of control, authorities across Canada and the United States decided to redirect their energies towards something fun and less harmful. When candy was given as a bribe, essentially, a bargain was struck and they would do no harm. Thus began the tradition of trick-or-treating. Because before this, it was essentially give us a treat or else. Pushover outhouses. Oh, I can imagine all the stuff that they did. Because the modern day trick-or-treating, it was taking off. I mean, during the sugar rations and everything due to World War II, trick-or-treating kind of took a little bit of a dip. But in the 60s and 70s is when it really started taking off again. As these children who grew up trick-or-treating grew up, they began to have Halloween parties of their own, incorporating some Scottish and Irish traditions in these parties. And it took on a less religious theme and more of a fun time that we know today, with no religion being incorporated. Now, churches today will have their own gatherings, trunk or treating, where they've got some trunks with like coloring, Jesus and God-themed coloring books and treats for the kids and activities that are church themed, which there's nothing wrong with that, because some religions are trying to still keep the religious tones that were associated with it for all those hundreds of years kind of tied in there so that's not forgotten. Now, around the 70s is when costume parties really started branching out, spirits and monsters and witches to heroes and different kinds of figures like that, as well as the Gothic stories that were influenced by creatures of older times, such as vampires and werewolves, started being written and gaining in popularity. Aspects of these stories were woven into Halloween and gatherings. And then, of course, when movies started producing all these, it started becoming a Halloween theme as well. Nowadays, whenever some kind of horror or suspense movie like that comes out, it typically is coming out around Halloween. I know AMC is having a horror movie marathons on there, as well as there's another streaming service associated with AMC called Shudder, where it is all horror and suspense shows and movies. But over time, as our traditions meld and evolve, we have lost some things, such as leaving a place setting at the dinner table for a lost relative. A lot of people really don't do that anymore. There was also something, I think especially in the 1800s, called a dumb, as in quiet or no speaking dinner, where a feast is held, and instead of speaking, members would reflect on the ones that they have lost. There was a Scottish tradition that was lost called an apple wedding, where one would continuously peel an apple so that the skin was all one long piece, and then throw it backwards over your shoulder. The letter which it most resembled would be the first letter of the name that you were to marry. And if it came out to not represent a letter or anything like that, well, you're sunk. Lighting candles to help guide the spirits of your loved ones back to your home is a tradition that is also virtually lost. Some people still do it today, but it is not considered a mainstream Halloween, quote-unquote, tradition. And newer traditions over the last couple of decades, trick-or-treating used to be held solely at night. But in the last 2 decades, I remember them moving Halloween to the closest weekend to when Halloween falls. So if Halloween were to fall on, say, a Monday, public trick-or-treating might be that Sunday night. As well as enforcing hours so that they started earlier in the day so it would not be dark outside for the trick-or-treaters. This is a good and a bad thing because as our populations continue to grow, safety for children and motorists is a big deal, and it does make it a lot safer for them to do it. On the other hand, as a kid who went trick-or-treating at night, I can't imagine trick-or-treating during the day. I mean, come on. But essentially, now I know that there's probably more to the history of Halloween itself. If there is, please feel free to put it in the Two Girls One Rant channel on our Discord. This is what I was able to glean in a short amount of time. And I find it interesting how these traditions came from mostly European as well as the British Isles to form what we have today. Now, I do know that Catholics still celebrate Hallowmas to this day. At the very least, they celebrate All Saints Day. There's at least one person I know that celebrates All Saints Day. I'll just put it that way, and I know she's a Catholic or raised Catholic. So we know how Canada and America, how many people got picked up by the cops for trick-or-treating too late into the night, like 1 a.m.? You did? Oh my gosh, Sholin, why am I not surprised by this? Why am I absolutely not surprised by this? Oh, you were sick. You must have been an enthusiastic 6-year-old. But those who know today, other traditions for our Halloween today, corn mazes, Halloween parties, hay rides, haunted houses to go through. So let me ask you all this while I'm trying to get myself rehydrated here. What was one of your most favorite things, either as a kid or as an adult, that you thoroughly enjoy the most about Halloween? Ooh, Mama got in trouble for TPing somebody's house. Naughty, naughty. I know by the time I hit junior high, I was no longer allowed to trick-or-treat. I wasn't too happy about that because I loved it. As a high schooler, I can understand not doing it. Obviously, we didn't do it this year, but I'd love to get to a point where I can dress in costume on Halloween and hand out candy to the kids that are going door to door. So Dave loves horror films, and Sholin says that he is all about the candy. I am all about the harvest themes, personally, as the ability to dress up. Although these days I would probably be more than likely to put on one of my medieval combat dresses that I used for the evening fires and festivities. Then actually get something. You know, you can get something like, you can get a two-person costume or outfit to go with a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I mean, come on. That, to me, that just seems really kind of stupid. Oh yeah, I remember Mama would share some pictures with me of being dressed up for work. One year I wore one of my my dresses to work for Halloween. And it had the huge flare sleeves and everything else, which I was constantly having to roll up so it's out of my way for the keyboard. Alrighty. So with that, let's see. How do other countries today celebrate Halloween? Well, in England, it's not so much Halloween as remember the 5th of November. Guy Fawkes Day really is the Halloween and fall celebration for those in England. Now, somebody please correct me if the information I have is wrong on here. I did just a quick look up on this and found a Reader's Digest on it, which I don't 100% trust. But being that it was mentioned before from a previous source that November 4th, the night before the quote-unquote Halloween festivities, was Mischief Night in England, I think that kind of makes sense. And I know that Guy Fawkes Day, ever since that happened in the 1600s, Guy Fawkes Day has been a fall celebration. But because Guy Fawkes Day kind of clashes with Halloween, some have been trying to get the two merged into the same holiday. I don't know if there is anybody from England in chat who can kind of elaborate or direct me on this one and tell me if I'm completely out in left field or if I'm kind of on track. You still have Halloween and fireworks night as two separate occasions. It might be different in other areas. Okay. No, I appreciate that. I can look up all the information I want, but I actually prefer getting the information from the people who live in those areas, because to me, that's more accurate. So let's look at Ireland. Ireland, obviously, since a good portion of our traditions come from there today, they still follow some of the traditional ways. I'm sure bonfire. The Irish also used to make something called barnbrack, which is an official Halloween dessert. Now, I don't know why, but the stupid article that I got this information from didn't include Scotland, because some of our traditions obviously come from Scotland. So Dave, being our expert in Scotland in the channel, how do you guys celebrate Halloween today? Is it fairly similar to how you guys did in the past or the medieval era? Or has anything changed? Has some of it been Americanized? So while we wait for Dave to do put some information into chat if he's willing and able to, let's talk about Russia. They emphatically do not celebrate Halloween. They're very vocal about why this holiday is not welcome in their country. Some politicians and religious groups say that it goes against their Christian and cultural values as well as traditions. Now, remember that Russia has their own Orthodox church that they follow, and I think it is the state religion. If only Vidro was here, Vidro would be able to tell us because he's from Russia and China. Now, they don't celebrate Halloween per se, but they have their own equivalent of the Day of the Dead called the Hungry Ghost Festival. This goes on for several days and it involves honoring good spirits as well as avoiding evil ones. So it's not Halloween, but it's the same, well, at least how Halloween began, the same kind of concept. So that's pretty cool. Now, Japan does not have their own equivalent that I'm aware of. However, they're slowly adopting the holiday of Halloween. Yep, my note here says that they don't have a native equivalent. But cosplay is a major part of their youth already, and there's a large emphasis on dressing up for this holiday. So it's kind of catching on there through the youth. So Dave says, basically, like most places, we do the trick-or-treating, have Halloween-themed parties, and generally treat it as a spooky, scary day. Churches also usually have gatherings, but less so these days. The focus is more on spooky, scary stuff and Halloween parties. Ah, cool. Do you guys do the pumpkin carvings over there, or are you still doing turnips? And no, it's not meant to be, I guess it is kind of a joke, but it's not to be disrespectful. I actually am curious because turnip carving originated over in Ireland and Scotland, so I'm wondering if you guys stick with that, or if you've moved to pumpkins as they started doing. Okay. All right. So Germany, Halloween only started to catch on in Bavaria roughly 20 years ago. Some still resist the holidays, but others celebrate it by attending pumpkin festivals in Retzerland, which I'm probably pronouncing incorrectly, or touring old ruins of Burg Frankenstein Castle, which is where the Frankenstein horror story began. But we also do apple duking. I'm guessing bobbing for apples is what that is. Making scary cakes, plus some other traditions like nut burning and kale pulling, and not those kind of nuts. Okay, so the nut burning. I think I read about this too. It's where you throw a nut that's still in its shell into the fire, and if it cracks open, that means you're going to have a significant other in your life soon, and if it doesn't, no wedding bells anytime soon. Is that correct? If no noise, all good. If it hisses, you're going to be in trouble. Ooh. Okay, so this one that I read was completely incorrect. That sounds like a fun little activity to do, though. And I do remember when we had Rudy on here for our Around the World series and visited Germany, Destiny was asking him if they do celebrate Halloween over there, and his response is, not really. So it's really not one that's celebrated over there. But you've also got Romania. So in the original Bram Stoker novel, Dracula's castle can be found in Transylvania, a region in central Romania. Bran Castle is one of several castles associated with the Dracula legend, and it looks like it is open for a dance party on All Hallows Eve. Now, Mexico, of course, they do not celebrate Halloween. They celebrate the Day of the Dead. Now, this is celebrated on November 2nd, where they honor their deceased friends and family. They believe that on this day, the spirits come to visit the world of the living. Celebrations to honor them are very colorful. There's always food and drink left out for the spirits. And while it is not Halloween, it's still the same underlying theme of honoring ancestors as the ancient Celts did. I'm one who is in very much awe of any culture other than my own, whether or not it's from my ancestry or not. So I don't really know much about Day of the Dead personally, but I always know that it'd be like the sugar skeleton masks, or sugar skull. masks and decorations. Everything is very colorful. There's always a lot of food. They light candles. Sometimes they'll have pictures of the deceased ones. Some will actually go to the graves of their loved ones and lay some treats out there for them. Dave says he would love to go to a Day of the Dead thing. I think Mardi Gras has their own celebrations as well down in New Orleans, with a lot of voodoo-esque traditions integrated into it. So I definitely don't want to insult any kind of Mexican culture by saying Day of the Dead is Halloween, because it is definitely not. And especially the way that we celebrate Halloween today, having gone away from the religious aspect and the honoring of the dead aspect, the Day of the Dead is very much a spiritual thing for Mexicans, anybody of Mexican heritage. But it is around the same time. It is for the same original purpose. But I thought that they were definitely worth a mention here. Yeah, I heard a joke from somebody. It's just like, I know what the Day of the Dead is. I watched Coco. And the person of Mexican descent just kind of rolled their eyes and threw up their hands, because it was just like, no. Saying it was more cultural appropriation than representation. All right, so who is ready for some Halloween stories? We have 3 stories that were submitted, and I've got 2 stories of my own to share. Now, these aren't like super like Hollywood style version of creepy stories. All right, so let's go on to some stories. Now, Sofa, this is not a story from her own personal experience. However, this is something that happened to one of her friends. So she says, a high school friend of mine was sleeping one night and woke up the following morning with 3 scratches down her back. She never woke up in the middle of the night, and she doesn't have any pets. Given the 3 scratches, she presumed that it was a demonic spirit. Her friend claims that the number 3 means evil spirit. The following night, she had her sister watch her sleep out of precaution to see if anything would mark her. Once again, she woke up with 3 new scratches on her back. Right around where the original spot was, even with her sister watching her all night. After doing some research for remedies online to prevent evil spirits from harming her, she found that salt helped get rid of the spirits. So the next night, she placed an open salt shaker next to her bed. The next morning when she woke, there were no new scratches, proving that whatever was scratching her was some form of angry spirit. What do you guys think of that one? Like, everybody's got their own belief on ghosts and everything else. So what do you guys think? Do you think that it was an all in her head thing? Or do you think something might have actually been getting to her in her sleep? Personally, I think it might be possible. I mean, as an adult, I get some weird scratches here and there, but I'm also pretty reckless with myself, and I can usually chalk it up to I bumped into something or I did something else, and I just don't remember getting hurt in that moment, and I chalk it up to that and not evil spirits. But there are some times where like something will disappear in my house and reappear elsewhere. Sometimes I think I just have a little pixie or something in my house that likes to be mischievous. It's not impossible, but in this case, you don't believe it? Yeah. I mean, because there's a lot of what ifs. Now, if they were scratches down her back as it's stated, like we all can try and scratch our backs and everything, but I don't know of I'm a bit of a heavier woman. So if I were to try to put 3 scratches directly down my back, same direction as the spine, there was no way that I would be able to do that. But I can take a back scratcher and do it. But it's possible it could be something else. Yeah, I agree. Because my personal belief is, evil spirits and spirits in general, they exist. They're real. However, I feel that they don't happen quite as often as people think that they do. And I like to be a skeptic and try to rule things out with logic as best as I can. Open salt container sounds, yeah. The open salt now salt is an effective means of keeping evil spirits away, but it usually involves sprinkling salt in a circle around the area where you are at to create a threshold from them entering. The open salt shaker alone next to your bed, it's all about will and intent. Without the will and intent being there, I don't see how an open salt shaker could have done it. But, we weren't there. We weren't part of it. So we don't know for sure. But it does seem kind of creepy to me if you think about it, say, hypothetically it was true and have that kind of thing happen to you. Like, that's kind of scary. You would call yourself a skeptic, Sholin? If I ever experienced anything to be skeptical about, I've experienced a lot of things. Now, I would say at least a good half of them, if not a little bit more than that, have had logical reasonings to be proven wrong. Crack a window and burn some sage. That or just load yourself up on Taco Bell, fart a shit ton in your sleep, and then that'll scare the spirits away. But no, I really do appreciate Sofa putting in this entry as a story. Because whether there is a logical explanation behind it or not, creepy stories are still creepy stories and in the spirit of this wonderful holiday. You do not believe most ghost stories. Well, yeah, that's the thing. Because it all depends on the details of it and the environment and what actually happened. And oh, ghost adventures? God. Okay, Sholin, that is a perfect example. So last night, I've only got one light on in the living room here, just kind of conserving electricity, and that's all the light I really need. And I'm sitting here writing up all these scary stories and the history of Halloween and everything else, and towards the bedroom, I keep hearing creak, crack, creak, crack. But you know what it is? It's the fact that we're getting down to 30 degrees at night and the house is settling. Yeah, it was freaking me out at the time, and then I realized, I'm like, okay, nothing spooky's going on. It's the time of year. The house shifts and settles with the cold weather coming in. It happens every year. And during the day. Exactly, Sholin. And I don't like ghost adventurers because as somebody who does believe that spirits do exist, one, you don't want to piss them off. Two, they should be treated with respect. And if you do get a malicious one that is out there to hurt you, you definitely don't want to piss it off. Creepy is as creepy does. Honestly, if she was someone scratching her own back in her sleep, that's still pretty unnerving. I know, because like the way you would have to, like if it's going straight down your back, like parallel with your spine, the human body can't really contort their arms or their hands to do that. So hypothetically, if it was true, that's pretty darn freaky. So the next story we have is submitted by the King Zeus. All right, so Zeus says that when he was about 20 years old, he went to Job Corp. He was introduced to a Wiccan culture and had a couple of friends that were heavily into it. Some of the girls in the dorm started doing stuff. I'm guessing lighting candles or saying spells or using a Ouija board or something, but it's not specified. But one of them woke up to a giant-ass hoof print burned into and through her sheet and into the mattress. There was a giant ring of calcium and salt that popped up around her bed and where the hoof print was. He didn't believe it, but they actually showed it to him in the form. I'm assuming he meant form by meaning picture. It was some freaky ass shit. Alrighty. So what do you guys think about that kind of hoof print? Like, if they were able to show me picture proof and everything else, I would still be a little bit skeptical, but I would be still leaning more on the side of holy fucking shit, what the hell did you do? Because that's something else I want to point out too, is that, you've got the Wiccan culture, which is the rebirth of the witches, essentially. They are a nature-worshipping religion, trying to follow what they have pieced together of the old gods. Now, I am a pagan. I am not a Wiccan. Two different things. The story seems a little too far-fetched for Dave. I don't know. I'm very skeptical on the hoof print. Like, if they were trying to pull a hoax, they would be able to make something like that happen. I don't know, the reason I'm skeptical on it, but the reason that I have this like grain of salt in there thinking that it might be true is that I have seen instances where after something really bad comes to visit, there is a symbol or something that is burned somewhere near the individual. It's extremely rare though. I'm skeptical on that. And even if I saw pictures, I'd probably be a little more inclined to know. I guess it would depend on what kind of stuff that they were up to. If they did some kind of summoning circle, there was enough of them and they truly believed that they could do this, I think it's plausible. But that's why you have to be skeptical of these things too, is because while it's plausible, it is also very rare. But if I was somebody who, let's say this actually is true and did happen, if I woke up to a hoof print burned into my sheet and my mattress, I would be freaking the hell out and wanting to get the hell out of there. Well, and so thank you, Zeus, for submitting this story. I know we're kind of picking all these apart because there's 2 stories that I'm going to put on there as well. And I'm going to highly expect everybody to pick these apart as well. And I encourage it as well. Croc says, I need more details and be able to ask some questions because, in your opinion, there has to be something big to have happened to have that kind of supernatural activity. And I highly agree with that, Croc. Sholin, I made a mistake of letting Junior watch a portion of Lord of the Rings movie. He's freaked by spiders now. Oh my god. How old is Junior when he was watching that? 5 to 6? Yeah, I can see him being scared of spiders now, with people thinking it's true. Got it. No, I appreciate that clarification on it. Because, while, like I said, I do believe that, spooky stuff happens and supernatural things happen, but I don't think that they happen quite as often as people think they do, because it takes a lot of energy for it to happen. And I think one day, potentially in the next couple of decades, scientific equipment will be available enough for, because they say that magic is something that science just can't prove. And I think it's true of spirits. I mean, if you want to think of spirits as being an entity from a different dimension, even, I think we're on the road to kind of proving how all of that works scientifically. We're just not there yet. Is Jackal a little bit of arachnophobic? That's the other thing that's been incorporated into our modern Halloween. Like, for the people who are going for the super spooky stuff, playing on fears and phobias, especially in the thriller movies. People like to be shared. I have to go actually watch it, but there is a YouTube channel called Star Talk, where Neil deGrasse Tyson actually is the host of it. But there was an episode that they had on there of the science of why we like to be scared. Mama Dingo says that she was at a really low point and heard your long dead grandfather tell you that it would be okay. Yeah, he died when Mama Dingo was 7. Oh yeah, Mama Dingo. You know how Grandma B had a very specific perfume that she wore. Every now and then, I'll smell it. I'll get a whiff of it. I'll be like, where is that coming from? So, I mean, you start moving around the house trying to figure out where it comes from, and you can't get it anymore. But I will smell that. The old lady perfume is very distinct, and I don't think they make it anymore these days. But I'll get a hint of that. And I've heard of a lot of other people saying, like, so-and-so smoked a certain type of pipe or cigar, and now and then they'll get a whiff of it. All right, so the next story we have is kind of a joint entry from Tequila and myself. For those who don't know, Tequila is my older sister. She's about 7 years older than me, right about 6.5-ish. So this happened when we had just moved up to Wisconsin. Tack was in college at the time. My brother and I were in high school in our freshman year, and we had moved into this 2-story old Victorian home. And Mama Dingo, correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to believe that it was built in the early 1900s. Oh, yeah, Mama knows where this is going. She knows exactly where this is going. This is the knitting needle story. The people who were living in this house was Mama Dingo, Tulio, myself, and of course, Tequila. So it had a basement that I would not go near. If I went near the basement, even during the day, all the lights on, the hairs on the back of my neck would stand on end. I couldn't go near it. There was something about the basement, and I had no reason to be scared of it. But there was just something with the basement that I could not go near it. So it was the typical, 10-foot high ceilings on the first floor. It had a small office area in there, big living room area with a fireplace in it. Now, I think the fireplace was closed off and it wasn't usable anymore. But the structure of it still remained. Small kitchen with a little breakfast nook. It had an addition put onto the back of the place. You go upstairs, you had the master bedroom, which had a huge walk-in closet that I think might have been a nursery or something. I had the smallest room, which had a couple of steps going down into a closet. I could not really go into that closet. Every time I went in there, I had a feeling like the door would slam shut and I would be locked in there with the lights out. And I have a feeling that something very nasty happened in that room. I couldn't do it. My brother's room was just a little further down as well, and his was a normal sized room. I don't think there was anything great about that. My sister's room was at the end of the hallway in the addition. So one day, Mama was at work, and she worked at least a good 45 minutes away. Tulio and I, of course, were at school. My sister, I think she had the day off, so she was at home working on her a knitting project. And so in this house, we had a little 3-box intercom system, or a 3-unit intercom system. And was just basically like using little walkie-talkies, essentially. And so I had one plugged into my room. I think Tulio or Mama, it was in one of their rooms for the second. The third one was downstairs, I think towards the kitchen. So while my sister is there doing her knitting project, this starts going off. But it's all staticky. She also hears the toilet going off. Like the toilet just started running randomly. So she thinks that, okay, Tulio or myself are homesick, and we didn't say anything to her, and we're trying to freak her out and play a prank on her. So she goes over. Oh, there was a voice to it? I thought it was mostly static. Now, to give you guys an idea of when this happened, it was 20 years ago. So the details for me are very fuzzy, especially because I was not home during the time at all. Mama probably remembers it better. Tack helped fill in some of the details, because originally I thought she was hearing footsteps upstairs, but she said that she did not. It was actually the fact that the toilet started running. But she does remember the intercom system going off as well. So thinking that my brother or myself are trying to play some kind of prank on her, she goes over and she yells into the intercom. So a little bit of time goes by and this keeps happening. So she's like, fine. She takes her knitting needles to use as a weapon if needed. And for some reason, she goes over to the basement to check on it. And she doesn't remember why she did that. And then she goes to start checking upstairs. She kind of looks in our rooms, but nobody's there. Now, her being the furthest back in the hallway upstairs, she goes into her room and she thinks that somebody is in her closet. Now, her closet it's a huge walk-in closet, but it doesn't have a door on it. Instead, it has a bunch of hanging beads for a doorway. So at some point, she goes with her knitting needles and she's got them ready to stab if she needs to. And she whips the beads back and yells, "What are you doing in my closet?" Come to find out, it was her coat up against the far wall. Now, a follow-up to this story is that a girl in my grade who lived 2 doors down from us had the same exact intercom system. And she was homesick that day. And she had been using the intercom system at her house while she was sick. And it triggered on ours while my sister was home. And when Tack yelled into the intercom system, she freaked the hell out of that girl. At school the next day, I was telling the story, and I think it was my homeroom, and she was in my homeroom, and she started laughing. She's like, "Oh my God, that's what happened." And so we got to talking, and we found out that there's your logical explanation right there, guys. Now, to give a reason of why my sister might have thought that it was a spook in the house, though, is because that house was in fact haunted. But we didn't have anything major or bad going on. Now, the toilet running, it could be supernatural, but it could be every once in a while the water in those homes just kind of run to refresh itself. It's an old house. I mean, we could tell that the top floor was starting to sag a little bit. Crisis averted. Yeah, stupid toilets. But I mean, I would have things where I would be laying down in my room. The door to my room would be open. And at one time I saw our dog, Lucky, walk in. Now, Lucky was a white dog, medium height. And she was kind of at the smaller end of a medium size. And I saw her walk in one night. And I'm only half awake. I'm like, "Oh, hi, Lucky." And I reach over and I go to flop my hand down and pet her, only to find nothing but floor. I mean, this was a solid image of a dog walking into my room. Couldn't explain it. I was wide awake, so it's not one of those states where you're half awake, half asleep, seeing weird shit going on, but it's actually a dream. couldn't explain that one. There was constantly beep footsteps around the house. I think at one time, Mama got pushed down and a couple of stairs and landed on the landing and cracked open a window. I can't remember if that was her being pushed or if she just slipped on the stairs, but that would be the worst of it that happened in the house. Mostly footprints and creaking. What a coal cellar was. That's the thing though, is that a lot of these older houses were constructed in a way that they had features that are now outdated. And they look strange to us that are used to looking at things from a modern perspective. So that's definitely where you can say that there are definitely explainable things in these older houses, but in other cases, you can't explain it. There was other times where I would be going to sleep, and I would constantly have a hand on my back or on my chest. And when that happened, I didn't feel scared though, because I didn't feel like the hand was there to hurt me. It felt like, because I believed I was in the room where a toddler or a young child would be. And I think the hand was there as kind of a comfort, shush, go to sleep, good night, kind of like you would rub your baby's back when cuddling them to try to soothe them and to go to sleep. And I was by myself in that room. Nobody was in the room with me. And it was like feeling a physical hand on you. And that would happen on almost a nightly basis. The cellar was filled with coal, floor to ceiling. The 3 padlocks represent coal busting out through the door. And that makes perfect sense, too. I mean, that was your fuel source. I don't know if it was as common in areas like Wisconsin. I think if you were like further east where the coal mines actually were, and definitely in England where coal was a huge fuel source. I know in Wisconsin, having chopped wood for wood burning furnaces is more common, and they still use that today. You would be that that ghost that would grab boobies. Artanis, I 100% agree with that. But yeah, the knitting needles. That's definitely a story that does have a logical explanation, but until you know the logical explanation, it sounds terrifying. But this also happened directly in the middle of the day, of course. Okay, so I've got 2 more stories for you guys. So let me just kind of get the temperature of the room. Has anybody heard of summer wind in northeastern Wisconsin? All right, Gnome knows of summer wind. All right, well, guess what, Gnome? I've been there. I'm never going there again because I've got a story for you guys. All right. Well, I kind of figured there would be plenty of people here that don't know what it is, because it is kind of, unless you do have seen it, it's been on a couple of shows. But unless you've seen those shows or actually live in the northern Wisconsin area, a lot of people don't know what summer wind is. Now, summer wind was formerly known as Lamont Mansion. It's located on the shores of West Bake Lake near Land O'Lakes, Wisconsin. To give anybody a good idea, that is the northeastern part of Wisconsin, right on the border with the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Now, this was built in an older-fashioned home, so it had a large chimney that went up for the 2 stories that it was on each side of the house. You want to go there? I think they cracked down on it. Now, summer wind, get me? I'll go there during the day. I won't go there at night. Now, summer wind is private property still, so technically any of us who have gone there have been trespassing. It was told that originally it was built for a governor. Now, I don't know if it was the governor of Wisconsin, or there was a lot of people from northern Illinois, particularly Chicago, that came up there to for summer vacations on the lakes, which is still common today, but it was built for a governor. But that's the story I was told. Now, the story that I was at least told, now I haven't looked it up, but the story I was told was that the original owners of the home, they had a young child. I want to say it was a little girl, but I could be very wrong on that. And one day, for anybody who knows how the lakes up in Wisconsin go, our lakes are very cold all year round. Even in the hottest parts of summer, our lakes typically don't warm up that much. They're still in the 60s, temperature-wise in the summer. So the kid ended up losing their footing or something. Somehow they ended up in the lake. And later that night, the child had developed a terrible fever. After several days, the child passed away and was buried on the grounds there. The original owners ended up selling the house. Yep, the northern Wisconsin, especially northeastern Wisconsin, is a mountain range older than the Andes, so it's very ground down, very hilly. So once the original owner sold it, each owner thereafter, and it changed hands several times, but each time some sort of haunting would happen and would scare their residents off. And you are absolutely correct. One of the shows it's been on is called A Haunting. And I think on A Haunting, they had a recreation of what the house used to look like. Now, in the 1980s, the original house was still standing, and it had a reputation of a haunted house. And eventually, somebody did end up owning the land. However, the house was completely abandoned. One of the local legends for it is that one of the owners saw a ghost and was so spooked by it that he actually shot his pistol at it. And I think on the show So Haunting, they actually showed the door where the pistol had hit it. They ended up moving out, like lights constantly flickering and going out, doors opening and closing on their own. There was other things that happened. Another urban legend states that I think one of the most recent owners actually found human remains hidden in a wall during renovation. So after being abandoned for quite some time, the house fell into disrepair and nobody would really take on the property. And I think the last owner decided to keep the property in their name and not sell it just so nobody would have to go through that hell. By 1985, attempts were made to demolish the home, but it failed. On June 19th of 1988, the house was actually struck by lightning and it burned to the ground. Now, another local legend said that it was completely arson. However, the police department and the fire department at the time ruled that out completely. There was no signs of arson or anything, and the neighbors right next to it were awoken at the night with the lightning striking the house. So all that remains today are the two chimneys and the foundation. Now, I've been to Summerwind twice, once during the day and once at night. When we went during the day, it wasn't all that bad. It was a typical house. I mean, it looked like a farm-style house that had the two chimneys on it, you know, kind of a rectangular shape. So at the end of the two long ends was the chimneys for keeping the house warm. Now, my friend who was there said that he saw the actual flooring, or he didn't see the house there at all. He didn't see the chimneys. He didn't see the foundation. So when we were walking along the edges of the foundation and everything else, it looked like the foundation actually had the cellar broken into pieces in the basement. So as we're walking on the concrete portions into the middle of it, it looked like we were walking on air. Now, the friend who said this scene is a bit dramatic at times and will make things up and embellish it to make it look cool. So I kind of doubt his perspective on that. I don't think that actually happened. At this place, there's a lot of beer cans, a lot of graffiti. Kids go up there because in northern Wisconsin, there's jack shit for kids to do. So going out to some spooky place like this and drinking was a common theme. So of course, a lot of vandalism. Well, the time that I went at night, I went with a group of friends. And I'm like, well, I've been there during the day. How bad can it be at night? I mean, it's just a house that you got the concrete and brick remains of the house. You know, what's so spooky about that? Being there during the day, it didn't really seem eerie or spooky at all. So we went up there, and as I said, it was private property, so technically we were trespassing. So we parked down the driveway a ways and shut the lights off, and we took our flashlights and continued on foot up to where the house was. Now, one of the things that I was told is that while I'm there, do not take anything from the property. A lot of stories circulated around that people would take a brick or something from the foundation or a piece of concrete of the foundation back with them as a souvenir. And they would have an evil spirit that would follow them and haunt them. We were not allowed to take anything with us for that reason. While we were there, the house is in like a little clearing area. And people who trespass there kind of have made their own path going up to where the house is. So on this path to the side, to the right, we find an area where the tall grass is very smoothly laid down. And I was told that this is where the grave of the child is. Now, it's not. I'll be 100% honest, it's not. Later finding out that the patterns that are made in the grass where a deer will bed down, this directly matches up with that. So my friend starts freaking out because this little bedded down area in the grass is right on the edge of the clearing. And my friend freaks out, like, I can see the little girl, I can see the little girl. And we go up a little further and we're shining our flashlight on it. And like, I've got a really sick feeling. Like something isn't right. Like, I don't believe that this is a grave. And I don't see the little girl. And I don't actually see anything out of the ordinary. All I have is that feeling at the pit of your stomach, like something really bad is going to happen here if we do not leave. I don't like it. I can't explain it. I don't have any logical reason to back this up, but I don't like it. But we stay for a little while longer looking around and everything. And at one point, my friend screams and we all start running back to the car, and she is shaking so bad. She couldn't even tell us what she saw exactly. But it was something really nasty is the gist of what we got from her gibberish. So we get into the car and we start driving away and go on back to home. While going home, you know how you kind of, if you're the passenger, deer beds in the Midwest. Who would have thunk? I know, right? Popular area for deer hunting every year. And deer bed? Nah. So when you're driving home, it's dark outside. You know, you're kind of looking out the window, just idly. And in the window of the car from the outside flashes a half-rotted face constantly. And I freaked out. Like, seeing this face there, this half-rotted face there, and it wasn't like it was just a skeletal face that was like a Halloween decoration or anything, because this wasn't anywhere near Halloween. This was the middle of summer. But it kept flashing. Every time I would look out of the window, I would see it. And it did that until we were about halfway home, and then it stopped. And I want to say that was an evil spirit, kind of connected to that place, warning me never to come there again. I can't explain it. I can't think of anything logical, because I don't know of anything that is actually associated with that place. I didn't see anything while I was there, and I can't explain it, guys. But the feeling that it gave me after that whole experience is I'm not going back. There is something there, and I don't know what, but something there that, no, it does not want me there. It doesn't want anybody there, and stay the fuck away. But it is known as being a haunted place. And normally when somebody goes to a haunted place, they've got themselves all hyped up and everything else, and the littlest sound, like a squirrel could break a stick and they'll think it's a ghost. But that didn't happen to me while I was there. I am lucky nothing attached itself to me, because I have heard of that happening from haunted places. I was so deathly scared coming back from that. I never want to go back there. There was something there, and I don't know what it was, but it does not want visitors. It doesn't want anybody near there. And I think I don't know if it was showing itself to me. I don't know. I have a feeling that it was, and I think it was just giving me a warning of never return. So I'm going to respect its wishes and never return. I did not take anything from there because I didn't want to chance it. The reason I knew about Summerwind is some of my friends like to go there often, because we would pass Land O'Lakes onto the next place that I'm going to tell you guys about, called the Paulding Light. Has anybody here heard, or we refer to it as just the Light? All right, so a little bit of backstory on the Paulding Light for those who don't know where it is. This is located in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan by Paulding, Michigan, which is where it gets its name. So it's claimed that an old railway used to go through there, and that a deaf railway worker or conductor, I can't remember which one it was, felt the vibrations of an oncoming train. So he laid his head down on the tracks to determine how far away the train was and which direction was it traveling. But the train was closer than he thought it was, and it ran him over and chopped off his head. And so the light that is seen up there is the light of his lantern as he searches for his head. So that's the basic story of the Paulding Light, that the light is the conductor constantly looking for his head, and the light that you see is the lantern. Now, I believe the Paulding Light has been on Unsolved Mysteries a long time ago, and they weren't able to come up with anything conclusive. The closest thing that they came up with was anybody who has heard of ley lines, which are lines of energy that crisscross the earth, kind of like longitude and latitude does. And when two ley lines intersect, it creates a place of power. And they believe that the location of the Paulding Light is a place of power. Now, the railway obviously is not there anymore. What you get so you come off of a highway and you go down this long dirt road, and there's a campsite. I mean, there's a way to go towards a campsite area in here, but I've never seen the actual campsite. I think it's a dirt road that it's quite a ways away, or maybe it's a park or something that's closed at night. So you go down this dirt road and you park because there ends up being a guardrail that makes it so that you can't go any further. And there's a mound of dirt just on the other side of the guardrail where a lot of people, that's where we end up sitting and just watching. So continuing down this dirt road, it goes all the way through about 7 miles. And at the end of that 7 miles is another highway. So you do see a lot of white light and red light. But what you're actually seeing on this stretch, and I think that the way that the trees and the hills are, it distorts it a bit too. You're actually seeing headlights and taillights of the cars on this other highway there. Because the reason that there is a 7 mile long dirt road is for a good half of it, or at least a mile of it, it is clearance for a electric line, a power line to run through there. And so they have to get in there for maintenance. And then the other stretch of it on the other side that people normally don't walk down to is that people actually have houses back there. So this power line is bringing power to all these homes that are back there. But they're a couple miles away from where you end up parking that nobody really takes that into consideration either. So to give you guys a little bit of a clue what goes on here. So as I mentioned, there's really not much for kids to do in northern Wisconsin. So another popular drinking place and hanging out place is the Paulding Light. We would go there and sit on the mound and watch. And, you know, of course, a lot of jokes going back and forth. One night we were joking around that the Paulding Light is just a pissed off firefly. And whenever his butt turns red, he's mad at something. Well, those were just the taillights of the other car. One of my friends that was up there at the time, he said that he used to go down to the other end of the highway on the opposite side, use one of those huge searchlights and flash it on and off and freak out the people who are sitting there waiting to see the light. So the light that's seen on a regular basis, that one does have a logical explanation behind it. However, some of the other happenings that have gone on there, no explanation. Because I will tell you from personal experience that the light up there is actually amber, and it does not necessarily show on the roads. Cue creepy music. I broke down the area because, having walked through the area a bunch before, I've broken it down into a couple of zones. So anybody who's sensitive to the energies of the area. So I broke this down into zones. So you drive down the road where you park the mound. That's the good zone. That's the safe zone. Nothing bad is going to happen when you're sitting right there. Now, as you start walking down the trail a bit, away from the mound, you kind of go downhill a little bit. There's a little bit of a creek. You know, not very big. It's maybe 2 feet wide at most, and then hardly anything when it's the water level is lower. That's kind of the neutral zone. Once you pass that, you're in no man's land where anything could happen. Now, we did manage to walk out. There was a kind of a deer trail, beaten-ish kind of path back there. The total distance from where you started and where you ended up was about a mile. So we took our digital cameras and everything with us, and we went down this way. As soon as I passed the creek, oh God, you would hear shit that hard to explain. I tried to pass it off as it's owls. There were also, I think, bobcats in the area. I was told if you hear a baby crying, get back in your car. I've never heard a baby crying, just for the record. Just for the record, no baby crying. So we get to this area that ends up overlooking a steep cliff that goes down into a ravine. Now keep in mind, old mountain range. So this kind of stuff was common over there. So we sit down and we're taking pictures with our digital cameras, and I actually catch a full body apparition. Now, we tried to debunk it. You know, and this is what any good ghost hunter should try and do. Like, okay, I got a full body apparition. I'm excited. Okay. Now, what was going on? The person to the left of me was smoking. I said, okay, keep smoking. I'm going to take a bunch more pictures at random. The smoke in any picture that I caught, the smoke was not consistent with this full body apparition that I got. It was mostly like an outline of a person in like this white mist. It was freaky. But nothing bad happened there. Well, this isn't actually my scary story from it. That's just kind of to set the scene. Oh yeah, also while we were at the cliff, we also saw orbs. Not in the digital camera pictures that we were taking, because in the camera we were taking, yeah, we would get quote unquote orbs, but there's a lot of people moving around on a dusty dirt road. These are actually dust particles in the air, not actual orbs. So the orbs that we ended up seeing were without the camera. So anything supernatural that would happen at Paulding would actually happen around 1 or 2 a.m. when everybody left except for a small group of people. And on this particular night, this is exactly what happened. It was about 1 a.m. and I was in a party of 5. We all had been in the same vehicle. They decided that they wanted to walk down past the creek a ways to see if anything were to happen. So as I'm walking down the path, we leave the mound, we get towards the creek. We're almost towards the creek, and keep in mind, I consider this the neutral zone. My buddy Mike and I look at each other at the exact same time with this overwhelming feeling, like overpowering feeling, like you have to go back now. It is not safe to go past that point. And we don't know what's going on, but all we know is like we tell the group like, hey guys, we really need to go back. Like it's not safe for us. We really shouldn't go. We're told, oh, you're just being scared. So the other 3 go ahead and go past the creek, while Mike and I continue back together, and we go sit in the van. And, you know, we're watching in the direction of the light, and we're kind of just chit-chatting, talking about mix of everything, really. After about 30 minutes, we see the flashlights waving erratically as they're coming back towards us. We get out of the car and hop over the guardrail to see what's going on. They claim that a spirit had attacked one of the girls, and we'll call her Sarah because, to be honest, I don't really remember her name at all. And she was acting possessed. She was speaking gibberish, and her chest would constantly heave up. Now, being attacked by a ghost, I believe that happened. I don't think that she was possessed. I think she was acting out for attention, to be honest. But what happens next is what I can't explain. I rush them back to the van, but as I do that, I see a huge amber orb coming up behind them and slowly making its way towards us. And it's coming from the woods. It's not coming from the road. It's not somebody's car. It's not a flashlight. And I will also note that the moon was not out that night, because I like it when the moon is out, because then it lights up the path that I'm walking. This amber light glows bigger and bigger and keeps approaching us. And then all of a sudden it just disappears. So we get everybody back into the van. Mike's up in the front passenger seat. The other 3 are in the back. One girl's freaking out. The other one, who was claiming to be possessed, is still acting out and everything. The other guy that was with them thinks that he's a know-it-all and that she is possessed, and he's doing all this shit in the back seat. I'm like, okay, whatever. But I'm still worried about that giant amber orb that was coming up to us, because I was told that that is the actual light. So as I fire up the van, I lock the doors, which is silly. I mean, if you got a ghost coming after you, do you honestly think that locking the doors are going to make a difference? Hell no. But, peace of mind. I take a quick look in the rearview mirror, and I see a large light in my rearview mirror. Now, keep in mind, I'm still have the van facing down the path. I turn around and I look down the road towards the highway that we're going to end up heading to. And the whole end of the road, which looks like it's lit up in amber. Now, there is one street light that is at the end of that road. However, that street light is so far away by the time you get to the end of that path that you cannot see it from where you are. Start up the van, get it turned around, and start hauling ass down this dirt road best I can. It had rained recently and it was washed out, so it was very hard on the vehicle. So I couldn't go that fast. But I went as fast as I safely could. And that amber glow is still ahead. and it's moving around and everything else. I have that sickening feeling that I had when Mike and I decided to turn around was growing worse and worse and worse. I thought somebody was going to die. You know, it was bad. Just as we're approaching the highway, the amber light disappears all of a sudden. I'm like, what the fuck? And as I get onto the highway, I punch the gas, put it into overdrive, and we're heading out. I just get this overwhelming sense that like there's a horde of shadow people, like an army of them following my car, like you would see it in like a cartoon or something. You know, something was following us, and it wasn't happy, and it was out to hurt us. And everybody else in the vehicle could feel it too. And I think it followed us till about Eagle River. The girl, I think she was faking a possession. She ended up being just fine. Claims she doesn't remember anything. But yeah. Normally if somebody was speaking in tongues like another language or something, there is a pattern to that speech. There was no pattern to the speech at all. It was just utter gibberish. Seeing this giant ass orb and having it disappear. Now keep in mind, like there was one street light at the highway portion of where we came in. There was no lights or street lights where we came in or where we were sitting with the car. The only other lights were the headlights and taillights of a car 7 miles down this stretch of area. And there was no way that it could be as big as it was where we were at. So I can't explain it at all. So that is my scary story from the Paulding Light. I do have one more scary story from up in that area that I forgot about. Now, Brock has brought up a very good thing that I kind of want to survey chat with. If there was a haunted place anywhere in the world that you could visit, where would it be? I'm interested to know this. Hill of Crosses in Lithuania, the Catacombs in Paris, the Suicide Forest in Japan, I'm not even going to try and pronounce that, the Banff Springs Hotel in Canada, and that's just your top 4. There's so many other places you want to visit. The Stanley Hotel or the Queen Mary is what Croc goes for, but your dad would be allowed. Well, if it was allowed, Cookie, what would it be? There are some haunted places that I would like to visit. I can't think of anything specifically that comes to mind. I'd have to look around a little bit. I know there's some hotels that are pretty haunted, that have a rich history, like some houses that were built in like the 1800s or before. That would be a place that I would want to go. Someplace rich in history. One of the World War... Oh, yeah. That place... Let's say it was one of the concentration camps. Those places have got to be haunted. And that has got to have so much bad juju associated with it that there is no way in hell you could pay me to stay there for one night. Maybe if it was in the number of a couple $1 million, sure, but no, otherwise. I don't think it would be allowed. Maybe under certain restrictions or with waivers signed and everything. I know some of these ghost hunting TV shows that are around, they get special permissions to stay there, but I don't think a random person could. But I definitely see the appeal for those who are wanting to definitely stay in a haunted area. That would definitely be a good one to pick. So I think the last story of the night that I'm going to sign off with is, so my friend and I decided to go for a night drive around northern Wisconsin. And we did end up in the Land O'Lakes area, but we didn't go to Summerwind. We didn't go to the light. On one of the side roads, you know, I don't know where we're going. So she's just telling me, hey, turn here, turn there. And I'm just kind of idly going by because she knows where she's at. Well, to start the night off, it's not spooky, but to start the night off, to give you an idea of how event-filled the night was, we come across a car with its lights flashing on the side of the road. Well, there can be a lot of creepers up in that area, and we decide that, okay, we're just going to go past this car until we see broken glass all over the road. And her having been a nurse at one time, she doesn't have a valid license at the time anymore. But it's still in our nature that, okay, we see broken glass, they have their hazards on, we need to stop. So we stop behind the car, we get out, and we try to figure out what's going on. There's 2 young girls, they've got to be late high school, that are just freaking the hell out. They had a deer come up and whack them right in the passenger side of the car door, breaking out all the glass in the passenger window. And they're fine, they're not hurt. My friend's like, where's the deer? You know, if it was just freshly killed, we can take it home and gut it. I'm thinking, ooh, venison. But at first, we make sure that the girls are okay. They're fine. The passenger seat girl is shaking the most and thinking that, I've got glass all down my back. Oh no, oh no. Like, what do we do? We're like, okay, first call 911. You've got your cell phone, right? Call 911, get them here, have them check you out, then call your parents, let them know what happened. So we wait around for emergency responders to come in, and we stay on the scene because we were the ones to come on it first and direct the girls of what to do. And the cops don't really talk to us. The EMTs don't talk to us. I mean, there's really no reason to. It's a pretty standard thing. Deer hit a car, no big deal. But we did ask the cop to get that deer. They looked for it. Nobody could find it. So we're eventually told by the officer that we can go. So we go along our merry way. And as we're driving along, we go through, it wasn't Land O'Lakes, but it was a very tiny unincorporated town of like 300 people. And all of a sudden we're driving through, like we take a turn on the highway and we're in like, it was like a couple block radius, and that was the extent of the town. Well, there was like one street light in the middle of this town, and as we're going past it, poof, goes out. We get 4 blocks away, light comes back on. But as the light goes out, my friend starts freaking out and claims that she saw the Mothman. And she is suddenly filled with this overwhelming sense of dread that her husband is going to die. And we're out in no service land, so we can't use our cell phones to call. So she directs me towards an area where there is a gas station and cell reception. So as soon as she starts getting bits of cell reception, she keeps trying to call, and he's not answering. This makes her freak out even more. So we get back to the to where the gas station is, and she finally gets a hold of him, and he's fine. Everything's okay. And so we go inside. It's coming up on almost after midnight. So I grab myself some caffeine, and as soon as I pay, I go up to my friend, and because she was debating on getting something and decided to suddenly not get something. She's like, we need to get in the car now. That guy has a gun in his pocket, and he's going to rob the store. No, she didn't see the gun. She had no way of knowing that he had one. I'm like, oh shit. So I don't say anything. I very quietly get into the car, and we drive away. News reports the next day did confirm that, in fact, somebody did do an armed robbery on that store just after we left. The person was waiting for more customers to file out, so there would be fewer people to try and control for the situation. So on our way home, we're nearing the Eagle River area, and we get behind a red car. And the driving is a little erratic. So I'm thinking, okay, there's tons of bars around here. This guy is probably drunk driving. I'm going to play it safe, and I'm not going to pass him. And my friend and I was thinking that. I didn't say it out loud, but my friend says, do not pass this person. I want you to actually back off a little bit more than what you currently are and give them plenty of space. If we pass them, something bad will happen. I don't pass them. They eventually turn off on a road. And we continue on our way, go home. I get home really late, go to bed. Next day, I get a very weird call saying, Mel, you need to come over here and you need to come sit down with us. And I have something I need to tell you. That car that we had passed, it had very specific stickers and decals on the back of the truck, and it was a red pickup. Like I said, very distinct. Now, my friend's husband was part of a volunteer fire department at the time, and so any kind of accidents they get word about. It comes to find out that the driver of that vehicle was driving drunk that night. When he turned off away from us, he was going to pick up his wife. And on their way home, got into an accident where they flipped the vehicle. The wife was ejected from the vehicle, and the vehicle landed on top of her. It was found upside down, and I think the driver died as well. And so the fact that, Mothman experience in the same night, and Mothman usually means death, and the car that we were following ended up having 2 casualties. Like, we were so freaked out the next day that it is not even funny. But yeah, that's my joy of being in the Northwoods for you. I hope you enjoyed these spooky stories. I really do. I had fun reading them off. I do apologize that I couldn't remember more details and to be able to beef up the stories that I shared with you. But the history of Halloween I thought was extremely interesting. How over time and multiple cultures coming together has created the holiday that we all enjoy today. And I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I do. And I want to thank you for joining us today. Catch us in 2 weeks again for the Two Girls, One Rant podcast.